So picture a massive cargo ship sitting idle in a port. The engines work perfectly, the crew is ready, and the cargo is all loaded.
Right, everything is ready to go.
Yeah, but the ship cannot move. And it can't move because a proprietary algorithm, one that literally no human being fully understands, has silently decided that the shipment's trust score is, well, just slightly too low.
It's a pretty wild scenario to imagine.
It really is. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, a local farming town is suddenly running out of water. And it's not because of a drought, but because a massive windowless building next to the highway is learning how to write better code. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today is May 31st, 2026.
Thanks for having me. We are looking at a really fascinating stack of structural observation reports today.
We are, including the recent MGF weekly report and a theoretical framework called the membrane contact phase model.
And I'll say right off the bat, these sources are, they're incredibly dense. They demand a complete shift in how we look at the current technological landscape.
They really do. And before we get into the actual mechanisms of all this, I want to establish the mission for you, the listener. We are not here to give you a news summary today.
Right, no tech CEO gossip.
Exactly. We are not doing investment forecasts either. We are here to explore a deeper structural question. Is the recent AI boom actually creating a completely new reality? Or is it merely exposing the hidden constraints of the physical world we already live in?
Which is a crucial distinction.
It is. What exactly are we seeing here? Because going through these reports, I kept returning to a very specific visual. It feels like we've built a futuristic race car, a machine capable of mind-bending exponential speed, but we were trying to drive it on a 19th century dirt road.
That is honestly the perfect analogy. The car represents the algorithms, the massive influx of capital, and the sheer computational velocity.
Right.
And the dirt road is the physical, institutional, and geographical reality of our planet. The friction between the tires of that vehicle and the rocks on that road is what the MGF report is really trying to quantify.
So let's start with the vehicle itself, because the surface level narrative, the story you see on financial networks, is just pure acceleration.
Oh, absolutely. The week 22 reports in our stack show an industry that just refuses to slow down.
Yeah, we're seeing soaring market caps, massive capital concentration, continuous data center expansion. But what I find really fascinating is where that capital is actually going. Because it's not just flowing into flashy consumer apps anymore, right?
No, not at all. A significant portion of it is driving what reports call sovereign AI. And this is a really critical shift.
Sovereign AI, meaning nations building their own.
Exactly. We are seeing individual nation states aggressively procuring specialized GPUs. They want to build their own independent artificial intelligence capabilities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're doing this to ensure they aren't entirely reliant on a handful of foreign tech corporations for their foundational compute power. And alongside that, you have this insatiable demand from the private sector for those exact same servers.
I want to push back on the prevailing narrative here, though. The public story is still overwhelmingly framed as this infinite software revolution.
Right, weightless data in the cloud.
Exactly. Neural networks, lines of code living in the ether. But looking at the scale of this capital expenditure, nations buying up chips that scramble for sovereign compute, what might be happening beneath that visible story?
Well, the sources argue that we are absolutely letting the buzzwords blind us to the physical reality of what it actually takes to run these systems. We are operating under a totally outdated paradigm.
Because we still categorize AI as a software industry.
Yes, and the MGF report is explicit in stating that AI has fundamentally transitioned into a resource competition. It's now functioning as an energy OS, a resource OS, and a logistics OS.
Okay, I need to wrap my head around that transition.
Sure, basically the foundational layer that makes everything run isn't just clever mathematics anymore. It is heavy industry.
It is so hard to internalize that. We are so conditioned to think of an app as something that just exists on our phone. You download it, and it works.
I know, but the sources are suggesting that interacting with a modern AI model is honestly less like opening a calculator app and more like turning on a blast furnace.
A blast furnace.
Seriously. To understand why, you have to look at the thermodynamics of how these models are trained and operated. A traditional search engine query retrieves existing information, right? So it requires very little energy.
Right.
But a generative AI model synthesizes new information on the fly. It's calculating billions of probabilities per second across thousands of specialized GPUs.
And those run incredibly hot.
Very hot. When you pack tens of thousands of these processors into a single server farm, with each one drawing up to 1,000 watts of power, you are essentially creating a massive localized thermal event.
Which brings us to a detail in the reports that completely caught me off guard. Cooling water.
Yeah, water depletion is a massive constraint.
You never see cooling water mentioned in a tech keynote. The MGF report points to it as a primary bottleneck. How much water are we actually talking about here?
We are talking about millions of gallons a day for a single large-scale facility. Because these GPUs generate so much heat, standard air cooling just isn't sufficient anymore.
So what do they do?
The data centers rely on massive evaporative cooling towers. They take potable water, run it through the system to absorb the heat, and evaporate it into the atmosphere.
And this is coming from local supplies.
Often from the exact same municipal reservoirs and aquifers that supply local populations and agriculture. The AI industry is quite literally competing for the physical elements of the Earth: land, electricity, and water.
This completely reframes the timeline, doesn't it? Because if AI requires physical resources, it is bound by physical time.
That is exactly the point.
A team of engineers can update a software model in an afternoon. But you cannot update a regional electrical grid in an afternoon.
No, you can't. And the discrepancy between those two timelines is the core thesis of the membrane contact phase model, or MCP version 1.1.
Right, which is included in our source stack.
Yes. The model introduces a concept called shear. Like in physics, shear refers to the strain produced when two touching layers of a substance are forced to move in opposite directions, or at vastly different speeds.
The friction between colliding speeds.
Precisely. The model categorizes the world into two distinct operating systems. First, you have the FastOS.
Okay.
This encompasses the AI models that evolve iteration by iteration in a matter of months. It includes rapid capital movement and financial markets that react in fractions of a second.
And the dirt road is the slow OS.
Exactly. The slow OS consists of our physical and institutional realities. It's the time it takes to pour concrete, the decade it takes to build a new nuclear power plant, the years of local zoning board meetings needed for high voltage lines.
You can't fast-track human consensus.
You really can't. So when the FastOS demands gigawatts of power right now and the slow OS says, well, that will take 8 years to build, you generate massive societal shear.
Let's ground this in the model for a second. The framework states that this shear is pushing us into a phase called S3.5, chronic depolarization.
Yes.
I'll be honest, when I first read that term, it sounded incredibly clinical, like a medical diagnosis rather than the economic state. What does chronic depolarization actually look like in the real world?
Well, the biological metaphor is very intentional. In biology, when a cell fires, it depolarizes. Then it requires a resting phase to repolarize before it can fire again.
Right.
If you force it to fire continuously without rest, it fails. The model applies this to physical and social infrastructure. When the lightning-fast demands of the AI industry drag the slow-moving physical world along with it, the infrastructure doesn't usually suffer a spectacular movie-style collapse.
The electrical grid doesn't just permanently vanish overnight.
Exactly. Instead, it enters a state of chronic exhaustion. The system loses its ability to recover.
Just constant strain.
Yes. It enters a state of persistent high friction and local inflammation. Think of a local municipality that suddenly has to accommodate a massive new data center.
Yeah.
The local power grid is run at peak capacity with absolutely no downtime for maintenance. The local water board is constantly fighting over usage rights. The housing market gets totally squeezed by incoming specialized labor.
So the town doesn't cease to exist, but it chronically aches.
Yes, it is the physical equivalent of burnout.
It's like an overworked society. Or, honestly, it reminds me of the social media ecosystem, where everyone is constantly reacting, constantly outraged, and nobody has the cognitive bandwidth or the downtime to actually process anything anymore.
That's a great parallel. There is no repolarization. The mechanism is identical. It's just applied to concrete, copper wire, and transformers. The pressure is constantly building up beneath the surface.
So if you're listening to this right now, think about tectonic plates grinding beneath your feet. You don't necessarily see the friction while you're walking around on the surface.
But the pressure manifests.
Yeah, in ways you might not immediately connect to artificial intelligence. Your utility bill going up because the regional grid is stressed, a quiet strain on your county's water supply, or just endless municipal battles over land zoning.
And that observation leads to one of the most perplexing phenomenons detailed in the source stack.
What's that?
Given the immense scale of this physical strain, you would expect it to be the primary topic of global debate. Yet, the reports note an eerie, pervasive silence regarding these critical constraints.
The sources refer to this as calcification, or simply silence. Which is wild, right? You have the most hyped, the loudest, the most relentlessly publicized technological boom in human history.
Oh, every company's talking about it.
Constantly. And yet, it possesses these massive quiet blind spots regarding the physical toll. Why aren't we screaming about the water and the power?
The MGF report offers a structural explanation for this silence. It argues that society operates with an upper operating system, the dominant financial, political, and media narratives. Right now, that upper OS equates AI investment directly and exclusively with future economic growth.
And it is incredibly difficult to argue against growth. It's the ultimate trump card in any policy debate.
Exactly. The sheer volume of market optimism generated by that growth narrative essentially drowns out the localized friction. The upper OS looks at the stock market, sees trillions of dollars in market capitalization being created, and just broadcasts the message that everything is functioning perfectly.
Meanwhile, the pain is entirely localized.
Right. The model calls these local areas the living membrane, the everyday communities, the county utility districts, the local environments.
So they bear the brunt of it.
Yes. The upper OS extracts the abstract financial value while the living membrane absorbs the physical cost. Because the noise of the market profit is so loud and the people benefiting from it are so far removed from the physical data centers, the local friction is calcified, it is silenced.
I want to make sure I fully understand this mechanism. Are the sources saying that because the stock market is doing well, our institutions literally lose the capacity to perceive the physical strain? That sounds almost like a collective hallucination.
It is a systemic blind spot. Metrics govern perception.
Okay.
If your primary dashboard for societal health is the S&P 500, and AI companies are driving the S&P 500 to record highs, your dashboard tells you the system is healthy.
Wow.
The dashboard doesn't measure the dropping water table in a specific county in the desert. The financial metrics overwhelm the physical signals.
It's like being at a party where the music is so incredibly loud that nobody can hear the foundation of the house cracking.
That's a great way to put it.
But while the financial markets might be ignoring the dirt road, the sources make it explicitly clear that nation-states are not. They see the physical reality, and they are changing their entire posture toward this technology.
Yes, this represents the pivot from AI as a consumer novelty to AI as strategic national infrastructure.
So we are moving far past chatbots that write poetry or generate funny images.
Far past it. We are entering the realm of national survival. The reports indicate that behind the public-facing generative AI competitions, nations are deeply integrating these systems into their core architecture.
Like what kind of architecture?
We are talking about cyber defense networks, automated information warfare, and heavily subsidized industrial policy. The sources reference high-level discussions within intelligence communities like GCHQ and security partnerships like AUKey.
They see the writing on the wall.
They are looking at the foundational compute layer and realizing that whoever controls the logistics of AI controls the future of state power.
Which sets up an inevitable massive clash. You have the major technology companies operating on one set of incentives and governments operating on a completely different set.
It is the impending collision of two dominant operating systems. You have the free market OS. Its inherent goals are maximum efficiency, blistering speed, open borders for data flow, and ultimately, infinite profit scalability.
Move fast, break things, and optimize the supply chain.
Right. But the National Security OS operates on the exact opposite principles. Its primary goals are control, strict boundaries, risk mitigation, and systemic safety.
The total opposite.
Yes. The free market wants the algorithms deployed everywhere to reduce friction. National security wants the algorithms secured, localized, and weaponized to monitor friction.
And according to the sources, this clash is going to fundamentally rewire global logistics. This was perhaps the most jarring part of the deep dive for me.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when we think of logistics, we think of container ships, shipping lanes, physical bottlenecks like a canal getting blocked.
The logistics of the future, however, are algorithmic. The sources argue that AI is changing the flow of global trade at a structural, microscopic level.
Okay, unpack that.
The future bottlenecks in global supply chains will not be a lack of physical goods. It won't be that a factory in Asia failed to manufacture enough microchips or that a truck broke down.
So walk me through how an algorithm actually stops a physical ship. If the hardware is perfectly fine, the cargo is loaded, what is the mechanism that halts the trade?
Well, logistics is not just the physical movement of boxes. It is an intricate web of trust, credit, insurance, and customs authentication.
Right.
Currently, AI models are silently taking over the risk scoring for these networks. They ingest millions of variables, shipping histories, financial anomalies, geopolitical data points to assign trust scores to individual shipments.
So the bottleneck is a lack of algorithmic trust.
Yes, the bottleneck becomes a lack of authentication, a lack of credit, and critically, a lack of explanation.
Wait, what do you mean by explanation?
If a proprietary algorithm driven by the National Security OS flags a container based on a pattern of data that no human analyst can actually decipher, the container just stops.
Because it's a black box. You can't argue with it.
Exactly. There is no human customs agent you can present documents to who can override the system because the system's logic is opaque. We are shifting from a paradigm of human judgment, which is flawed but negotiable, to a paradigm of algorithmic judgment, which is absolute and unexplainable.
So a container sits at a port, perfectly intact, full of necessary medical supplies or industrial components. But the computer says no because of a risk variable hidden deep in a neural network.
Yes.
That completely redefines how the physical world operates.
It does. It subordinates the physical movement of the world to the invisible math of the security state.
We have covered an immense amount of complex ground today. Let's pull back and synthesize what we've unpacked here.
Good idea.
We started by looking at the sheer momentum of the AI boom, driven by massive capital, and a narrative that insists we are still just dealing with weightless software.
And then we explored how that acceleration is violently colliding with the physical reality of our planet, the heavy industry of energy grids, massive water requirements, and human infrastructure.
We examined the intense friction caused by the fast OS dragging the slow OS, resulting in a society experiencing chronic depolarization.
Right.
And we noted how the financial markets remain entirely silent about this physical strain because the narrative of growth drowns out the localized pain.
Finally, we traced how this physical reality is forcing nation-states to claim AI as strategic infrastructure, setting up a future where global logistics are governed not by the availability of physical goods, but by opaque algorithmic trust scores.
Which brings us to one final, deeply provocative thought from the source stack. We talked earlier about the membrane contact phase model, version 1.1. But the courses also include a recent update, the Fluctuation Stability Extension, or MCP version 1.2.
Yes, that update is a profound addition to the framework.
Reading this genuinely forced me to reconsider how we define stability itself.
The model suggests that as we navigate this transition, the ultimate danger might not be a sudden, dramatic societal collapse or a catastrophic failure of the grid.
Okay, then what is it?
Instead, the real risk is the loss of fluctuation and cognitive adaptability.
Explain the mechanism there. What does it mean for a society to lose its fluctuation?
Think of fluctuation as structural wiggle room. It is the noise in the system, the minor inefficiencies, the human nuance.
The ability to change course.
Exactly. The ability for a local community to change its mind or try a non-standard approach. The model calls this liquid stability. A healthy, resilient system is never perfectly rigid. It has to flow and adapt to unforeseen pressures.
Like a skyscraper or a suspension bridge, right? The engineers intentionally design them to sway in high winds. If you build a bridge to be completely 100% rigid, the first major storm will just snap it in half.
That is the exact principle. If we allow AI to force our systems, our global logistics, our national security, our municipal power grids, our social interactions into complete high-speed, rigid synchronization, we will undoubtedly gain incredible short-term efficiency.
The trains will run on time. The supply chains will be hyper-optimized.
But in doing so, we strip all the slack out of the system. We lose our long-term ability to adapt, to recover from massive systemic shocks, and to allow for the messy, unpredictable reality of human life.
Wow.
The ultimate danger is building a perfectly efficient system that becomes completely brittle.
So the fear isn't that the machine breaks down. The fear is that the machine becomes so perfectly rigid and synchronized that humanity no longer has the space to breathe within it.
That is the defining tension we have to navigate moving forward.
That is definitely something for you to look out for in your own life. Where are the systems around you, at work, in your community, in your own daily routines, becoming too synchronized? Where are we trading our resilience for efficiency? Where are you losing your wiggle room?
It's an important thing to watch.
So we return to the core mission of this deep dive. We've looked at the incredible speed of the race car, and we've examined the very real rocks on the dirt road. And so I leave you with this question to carry with you. Is AI creating a new future? Or is it simply illuminating limits that have always existed? Keep observing the world around you, not just for the dazzling speed of the technology, but for the unseen physical friction it leaves in its wake.